Greetings everyone, I hope you're well and having a great day. I'm Donovan, welcome to Burnout and Brake Stuff. Today's BBS video will be continuing on from BBS36 and the evaluation of our 74 Duster project and how we plan on getting it into the 10-second zone as a street-driven car. We're going to take it to the drag strip, jack it up, remove the tires, put on race tires, open a nitrous bottle, and have some fun. That's the whole intention here. So let's go ahead and get into this video and see how we make that happen. When I purchased this car in April of '02 for 400 bucks, my intention was to have a street strip car, and Woodburn was 52 miles in one direction, which gave me a 104-mile round trip. And on my best day, I think I've been able to get like 12 passes on the car, and on a bad day, only 4. So mathematics wise, it was just easier to come up with 10 passes, being 2.5 miles for a 106.5-mile round trip day, to the drag strip and back home. Hopefully driving the car both directions, hopefully. So doing some mathematics, figuring out the percentage of street time, 97.6526% of the time in that day going to the drag strip is spent driving on the street, and only 2.3474% at the drag strip. So it was very important to have a vehicle that didn't have 391, 410, numerically deeper gears. I wanted something that I could use with a 904 or a 727 and their standard gear splits, first gear being 245, second gear being 145, drive or third gear being 1-to-1. So I wanted to make sure that I upgraded the 8.25 axle that was 245 to an 8.75, because ultimately the direction was nitrous this 318 until it quits. See how much performance I can get out of it, and whatever caused it to quit, if it was economic to fix it, I would do so. If it melted a ground strap off the spark plug or something like that, fix it. If it just popped a head gasket, well, fix it. Put studs in it or something and clamp the heads back down on it and go again. And just keep nitrusing it until it finally quits. So that was the intention. And when folks heard that I was going to put nitrous on it, most everyone said, you just blow up the engine. They didn't understand. So anyway, back to this. 355 gear, 275 60/15 tire would make that 28-inch tall tire, 10 inches wide. And with the standard gear splits, like I was saying, 1-to-1 at 65 miles an hour, 2,800 RPM. Not too bad. And every 5-mile-an-hour increase or decrease, whichever way you want to look at it, is a 200 RPM decrease or increase in engine speed. So if I drop down to 60 miles an hour, I'm only going to be doing 2,600 RPMs. So, which works well for me because I don't particularly care to take interstate to the drag strip. I kind of like taking the back roads and seeing small towns and the like on my way. So, like I was saying, 2-stage nitrous plate kit. We're going to begin with the small block Chrysler, the other SBC. And then when that quits and we finally set that aside, we're going to perform 122 cubic inch tune-up, 440 cubic inch, the other BBC, big block Chrysler, not our General Motors counterpart. So that's where I started. And that was the intention, was to be able to drive it on the street the majority of the time, obviously, and make sure that the transmission works automatic, the kickdown linkage works appropriately so the governor operates appropriately, and have the vehicle be so simple and reliable that anyone can drive it. Anyone with a driver's license, so to speak. And it's more so important that a person's significant other could drive it and take it, to the grocery store, the convenience store, coffee shop, whatever. That was the entire intention of the build here. So the next phase was to get it home after purchasing it from Eric, because it was left with a partial oil change done. He had changed the oil in it, but left the oil filter off of it, so it made it quite a mess when I started it. I checked the oil. Oh, it's got oil in it, so we're set to go there. And I started it up, and he started screaming at me, "Shut it off! Shut it off!" No oil filter. Fun times. So let's move to the next phase with working with our 318 and check our performance with the 318. After our initial purchase in April of 2002, it would seem best to do an evaluation of our 318 and 904 that came in the car. Obviously, we want to check the oil pressure with a mechanical gauge, and temperature is less important with a mechanical gauge. Reason being is the factory gauges were not adequate enough, in my opinion. Oil pressure being the most important of all of it there. And then do a compression check on it. So with it up to operating temperature, all the plugs out, carburetor held wide open, crank on it. And the engine had a low of 110 PSI in number 8, and the rest of them all cranked between 110 and 150, with that one being the lowest. And then with our 904, we want to do line pressure testing, kick down linkage adjustment, and make sure that everything was good there. When everything checked out, we went ahead and spent money. YN 8007 intake in dual plane Action Plus was $160 back then. Holley 1850, so a 600 CFM vacuum secondary Holley carburetor, $230. And there was already a $15 set of Hedman swap meet headers on the engine. And then we purchased a TTI dual exhaust system. So we needed the collector adapters, their H-pipe, their Walker turbo flow or turbo mufflers, and then the tailpipes. That was $450. We bought a 2-quart extra capacity pan for the 904 and went ahead and rebuilt the front suspension. After all of this was accomplished, our first outing was in May of 2003. And so we're talking about 245 open differential. And at this point in time, and through looking through my notes, I don't really know what size tires I had on the car at the time. I believe they were 225/70 15 Eagle GT plus 4s, the Goodyear tires. Anyway, our first run, a blinding 18.245 at 82.88 miles an hour. And through some adjustments and getting rid of the restrictive single snorkel 360 air cleaner and going to, I believe it was the Edelbrock Fly's Eye. I could be wrong. No, it was a K&N 14-inch drop base element. That's right. 16.679 at 84.64. So that was our first go. We're still using our 2-barrel camshaft. We haven't swapped that out. We haven't done anything like that. And no nitrous at this time. We don't have our 8 3/4 and the 355 gears. So it's our first outing. Got to start somewhere, right? So that's what we ended up with. Let's check out what the next level of performance helped us. Our next modification was to get that 245 8 1/4 out and install an 8 3/4 355 sure grip. I was able to find, excuse me, a B-body 8 3/4 drum to drum for $50 from a 1966 Satellite through some friends. And I was able to purchase a 489 cased 355 sure grip without a yoke for $140 at a swap meet. So getting that equipment installed in the car, our next race was on 30 May. So this one was on the 3rd of May. So 27 days later, our first time was 15.79, 86 miles an hour, our best that day out of the 8 runs we were able to make. 15.571 at 87.26 miles an hour, which was a 1.108 reduction in elapsed time, so excellent, and a 2.62 mile per hour increase in speed. So that's pretty good. Got that one leg unit out of there that caused traction issues and the like. Get two tires gripping and make some positive results. So we're still doing this with the 2-barrel camshaft, no nitrous kit at this time. And let's see what the next performance modification brings us. Nitrous kit. Still running the 2-barrel camshaft. We're using an Edelbrock Performer that was adjustable from 50, 75, 100 horsepower. It's $350. Bottle heater, $120. And after reading the instructions for the nitrous kit installation, I understood quickly why people blew their engines up and why people would say to me, you're just going to blow your engine up, and laugh at me. Low fuel pressure cutoff switch from NLS, I think it was like $40 back then. I don't remember right now, I don't have that information in front of me. Also need, since the kit, the bottles inside the card also needs to have a blow-off valve to exit outside the vehicle. That was another expense that I don't have written here right now. It's not in my records. And so going back to the nitrous kit itself and reading how they wanted the fuel side installed, they include this hose barb, this T. That's what I want to say, this brass hose barb T. And what they expected one to do was to take the output of their fuel pump, output to the carburetor, output to the nitrous kit, the fuel side. Well, a mechanical fuel pump on a stock Chrysler rig like this puts out somewhere between 2.5 and 5 psi for pressure, and the kit wanted 6 pounds of pressure. So you also need the appropriate amount of volume to support that pressure. And I had this Holley red pump that delivers 7 pounds of pressure. I had this on a different car, and it wouldn't provide enough volume at that pressure in order to keep our low fuel pressure cutoff switch at 6 psi. It just wouldn't do it. I had even gone as far as plumbing in a second side, 2 fuel pickups, one for the fuel pump on the car and then one for the fuel pump here, the 7 pound Holley pump. And I still couldn't get the right amount of volume to keep 6 psi pressure on the switch to make it run. And so I was really banging my head, mentally, of course. What I ended up doing was I ended up taking both the output of the Holley pump and the output of the mechanical pump, combine them together. That was what allowed me to get enough volume and enough pressure to keep the switch from cutting off, staying off, so it wouldn't blow the engine up. Fuel pressure and volume is very important for the nitrous kit to work appropriately. So what did our performance numbers do for us? Well, approximately, 27 days later, our third drag race, we were able to go up and do 9 runs. Our first run was 15:54 at 88 miles an hour, which basically backed up where we were with our last run. At this point in time, I did not have a weather station, so I could not do a correction factor to factor out the weather. So we started off with the 50 horsepower jetting and tested that out and had fun, and immediately skipped the 75, jumped right to the 100. Everything was fine. So our 100 horsepower jetting yielded 14,119 at 101.04. So we pushed past the 100 mile an hour mark, and given our best time from a month prior, or we could basically look at that, 1.452 second reduction in our elapsed time, and an incredible 13.78 mile an hour increase. Now you have to remember, we're still running the 2-barrel camshaft here. This is fairly good performance measures. I mean, this is right on par with big block cars from back in the 60s, I believe. So anyway, yeah, let's go ahead and look at our next performance upgrade. Okay, next up on our performance checklist is a camshaft replacement. I went with the Hughes engines HEH 1523AL hydraulic flat tappet cam, 166.50 delivered to the door. I think I used a Perfect Circle lifters and didn't swap the springs, I believe, from the stock 2-barrel. The reason that I chose their camshaft is it's based on the 904 tappet. So the tappet can climb a shorter duration ramp to a higher lift than GM's 842 tappet or Ford's 875 tappet. I also selected a cam where 506 lift. Chrysler's valve guides generally don't allow much more than 500 lift, but with the factory stamped steel rocker arm, they're approximately 1.45. I understand it. I've never tested them. I don't know. I'm taking someone else's word for it over the years. And based on the cranking compression. So Hughes Engines has a very comprehensive listing of how to select a camshaft, degreeing it in, that type of thing. And so I just followed their instructions. Makes the most sense to me. So it was almost a year later, 28 May 04, we were able to make our 4th drag race, 12 runs, no nitrous, and I have paperwork that I was using a 235/60/15 BF Goodrich street tire. Not anything special, just a 235/60/15. So the first outing ran 15,169 at 90.94 miles an hour, and through some carburetor tuning using a G-Tech, checking out where my secondaries were opening on the carburetor, which was handy to allow me to change the secondary spring and get those secondaries to open sooner, resulted in 14,736 at 93.6 miles an hour. So that was our best at the time, best to date, naturally aspirated time. 14.6 is the best that I can recall, so 14.63, and we'll get to that here shortly. So what's our next performance measure after this? Let's find out. Our next series of updates came in the form of a Summit billet fuel pump and regulator combo, the associated plumbing parts. That was a $308.89 bill. Our Mickey Thompson 235/60/15 ET street radials were $149.95 a piece, or $148.95 a piece, and then the $20 mounting and balancing. Back then, cheap. It's like $70 or $80 now. The Holley 3310-6 I sourced out of a salvage yard, and I used the out-of-the-box specs as far as the jetting and that was concerned. but it required a 35 discharge nozzle. I think they come standard with 26s, something like that, and a tall yellow secondary spring. So after, looks like about a year and a half of monkeying around, camshaft change, that type of thing, upgrading the nitrous fuel kit and the like, we were able to get our 14637 at 94 miles an hour. That was our best naturally aspirated time, and our 100 horsepower led to the 12714 at 106.83. So looking back where we started, naturally aspirated on 245 gears, Dyno single spin, that type of thing. And that year and a half later approximately, we were able to reduce our ET by 2.042 seconds, pretty decent, and increase of speed by 9.78 miles an hour. But once again, no weather station at that particular moment in time back here to compare to this. So all weather related, and yeah, weather needs to be considered. But anyway, good performance numbers, and then disaster struck, and I broke the 904 in 4 pieces, set the car on fire at 107 miles an hour. Yeah, good times. So that led to the $900 New Yorker purchase and the 440 installation, and then continuing on through our mathematics, looking for eventually our 10-second quarter mile. So we'll see what happens. Now let's review our best 318 times to our best 440 times and see how we're going to make improvements moving forward. So going from 318 cubic inches to 440 cubic inches is 122 cubic inch tune-up. That should come with idealistically it would come with 122 horsepower, a 12 mile an hour increase, and a 1.2 second decrease in elapsed time. All good things. Let's see how we did. 14637 subtract 12.998 is 1.639 second reduction in elapsed time. Okay, 106.55 subtract 94.42 is 12.13 mile per hour increase. That's pretty good as far as I'm concerned. For an engine swap, we went up 122 cubic inches. We gained somewhere between 100 and 200 pounds in that swap. I'm going to do a weight check on that so I can verify 100% the difference between a 440 727 and a 318 and a 904. So, but for right now, it looks like we've done pretty well. Now the next thing that I want to look at is the difference between in performance with our nitrous oxide kit between the small block and the big block. I had made an error in the last video and transposed my 2 and my 9. So when we went from naturally aspirated using 100 horsepower of nitrous oxide, we went from 1463 to 12.7, from 94 up to 106, and we got this 1.923 reduction in ET, which is phenomenal, and a 12.14 mile an hour increase in speed. Good news. But let's look at where we're failing with our 440 and determining why the 440 did not gain the same type of mile per hour and a reduction in ET of the same. Why did that happen? Well, near as I can tell, I'm using the exact same 750 CFM 3310-6 Holley. On the 318, all I did was I moved it directly over to the 440. So it's obviously a bottleneck in the induction system, as well as I just kept the stock iron 1971 440 intake manifold, as opposed to on the 318, I was using a Wyand Action Plus dual plane intake manifold. Part number is 8007, I believe. Anyway, there's a bottleneck in the performance of our 440, and I tend to rectify that. I've already swapped out the intake manifold, as can be seen in an earlier video, BBS32, where we're rebuilding our carburetor. I stepped up to a $50 swap meet intake manifold, a Holley Street Dominator. It had a broken heat crossover on it. I just got out my die grinder, hacked all the aluminum out of there that I wasn't going to use for a heat crossover, got some epoxy putty and blocked that off. Same thing with the valley pan, blocked off the heat crossover. So I believe stepping up to an 850 is going to be the appropriate thing to do. What's really interesting to look at here is taking 12,998 and subtracting 1.923 from that leaves us with an ET of 11,075. That to me is pretty impressive. We're only talking about 100 horsepower nitrous oxide shot. It should go right down to an 11,075. So let's look at where we go from there. The next thing that we want to examine is trap speed and engine RPM. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at 94 miles an hour with 355 gears and a 26-inch tall tire equals 4,300 RPM. Okay, you do the mathematics, that's what you get. That's what the tack needle showed as well, and that's how I compare whether or not my tack works and the tires, gears. Tiring, diameter, and gears will give me that RPM. Then I can compare my tack to make sure my tack is doing what it's supposed to do. So next up, we can see with our 100 horsepower nitrous, we get to 106 miles an hour. Same thing with the 440 while it's naturally aspirated. Same tire diameter, same gear set, but a mile per hour increase due to the nitrous oxide injection. 4,900 RPM. They're the same. It's that simple. Next up, we're going to use our 100 horsepower nitrous to get us to 11,695, 116 miles an hour. Any guesses? Whoop-de-doo. 5,300 RPM. That's well within the stock bottom end performance of either a 318, small block Chrysler, or a big block Chrysler, as that matter goes. That stock junk is going to hold together unless there's something severely wrong with it. So the next thing that we want to do then is, I had reached the practical limits of being able to use 100 shot of nitrous right out of the hole with the 440. You had to pull the front end of the car off the ground, get to the top of its travel, and then blow the tires off of it. So my next step was, what happens at 5,300 RPM if I change from a 26-inch tall tire to a 28-inch tall tire? And let's examine that. Let's go from our 235 60/15 to a 275 60/15. Now let's do the mathematics for increasing tire diameter from 26 to 28 inches, maintaining our 5,300 RPM trap speed that we had at 116 miles an hour. So a 28-inch tire, tall tire at 5,300 RPM equals 124 miles per hour. ET for 124 mile an hour time, 10.69 seconds. Doesn't seem all that hard to me. How about you? 5,300 RPMs, 124 miles an hour, 10.69 seconds. So by removing the restriction, the 750, stepping up to an 850, removing the restriction of that cast iron intake manifold to an aluminum lighter weight single plane manifold, better flowing manifold. That intake manifold was rated from 1,500 to 6,500 RPM. The Holly Street Dominator is one of the best intake manifolds ever made for a street strip Chrysler product. Plenty of dyno tests out there will back that up. So that's the direction we're headed. And if it requires more nitrous, not a big deal. We'll just put more in it. A 3,700 pound car that goes 124 miles an hour requires 540 horsepower to the tire. This car running 1169 at 3,700 pounds has already proven itself at 440 horsepower to the rear tire. So same thing when it 1230, when 106 miles an hour in its efficient form should be 12.3 seconds. That's just a plain race car. This is a street strip car. So for me to be 0.6 off, not that big of a deal. Same thing right here, 116 miles an hour, should be an 1130, an 11.3. So for a car that I drive on the street, you know, it's I think that's pretty good to get that close in performance from a street car that's not strictly a drag car. I think I'm doing all right. So yes, to run 106 miles an hour naturally aspirated, that requires 340 horsepower, and it should run a 12.3 in the quarter. So not too bad. So basically what we need to do is take it to the track and see if it happens. So let's do that in the future. That's the idea. If you wonder how I come up with these numbers, there's books of mathematical formulas that can be purchased. You can go online and look up all these individual formulas and sit down with your calculator and work through that stuff. It's tedious and the like. The easiest way that I've found to do this is to purchase a Moroso power speed calculator. It's part number 89650, and these sell through Summit for $19.95. I think when I bought this one, it was $5.95. So if you think they don't work, that would be an inaccurate assumption, because this is the Reader's Digest version of what an engineer at the Chrysler Corporation, I believe by the name of George Wallace, that was how the clandestine group of engineers inside the Chrysler Corporation, known as the Ram Chargers, they used George Wallace's formulas back in the 50s, specifically 1959, to target the highest specific output Chevrolet products, GM products. And that was their goal with their Vomit Comet, later to be known as the High and Mighty, the 1949 Plymouth Business Coupe, a $50 car, and a warranty repair 354 cubic inch dump truck Hemi. It had been back 3 times for repairs under warranty, and Ram Chargers found a broken off tool in the oiling system that caused the bearings to fail. They removed the broken off tooling. That engine that couldn't became the engine that could. And Chrysler Ram Chargers won the C altered class top speed record, and NHRA banned their car the next year. The crankshaft center line was 36 inches off the ground. All the GM cars were no higher than 24 inches, and that was how NHRA got rid of Chrysler in drag racing. And Tom Hoover had a saying as they went along the years: the only thing that can beat us now is a pencil. So I'll leave you with that. I hope everyone has a wonderful day. That's what's most important out of this, out of anything, is that you have a great day and enjoy whatever you're doing. Thanks a lot for stopping by, much appreciated. And yeah, that's all there is to it. I hope you have a great day, and thanks a lot for stopping by.